Since the era of myths, every 200 years, the goddess Athena and the great lord Hades clash in battle, as the time for another such confrontation approaches. With the world plunged into chaos, the hopeful warriors of Athena will rise. Representing the constellations, they bravely fight without hesitation. In the 18th century in Europe, we meet a young boy named Alone. While walking, he encounters two youths harassing a dog and steps in to protect it. The youths wanted the dog back to butcher it, as it had stolen their food, which they had worked hard to buy. Alone offers his precious ink bottle in exchange, which they accept. Knowing the ink bottle could be sold for a good sum, he hadn't gone far when his friend Tenma, seeing the situation, kicks the two youths to retrieve the ink for his friend. Alone asks Tenma to stop, pointing out that the youths had their reasons, and expressing his dislike for conflict, preferring peace instead. The youths, realizing both boys are from the orphanage, are surprised that two such contrasting characters could be friends. Afterwards, Alone continues his painting of the goddess. While painting, Alone's teacher introduces a priest from a chapel in the woods, drawn by Alone's artwork. The chapel harbors a never-revealed painting of Saint Michael that compels sinners to repent upon viewing. Eager to see it, Alone aims to become renowned in the church. His teacher wonders why he hasn't yet painted the eyes, to which Alone replies that he hasn't found the right red. The priest directs him to a mountain in the north, where flowers dyed with the blood of a fallen angel grow, promising the true shade he seeks. Alone and the dog climb the mountain. Suddenly, the dog barks and runs ahead, forcing Alone to follow. They reach the place the priest mentioned, abundant with flowers and vivid colors. Yet, the red here is still not the shade Alone is searching for. Since he was already there, Alone decided to paint the scenic surroundings. But wildlife also turned their attention towards him. Suddenly, they scattered in fear. A girl appeared, introducing herself as Pandora. She had been searching for Alone for a long time to bring her king back to power. To do this, she needed Alone's body, the body of a human with the purest heart. She then kissed Alone, and a bracelet appeared on his wrist. She knelt down and proclaimed Alone as the king of the underworld, Hades. Shadows from the underworld began to seep into the human realm. Unfortunately for them, they encountered a warrior of Athena. He unleashed a flurry of dragon punches, knocking them down one by one. This warrior was Doko of the Libra constellation, who knew their gathering meant Hades had been resurrected. Doko sought the location of Hades, but they remained loyal and refused to betray their king. Meanwhile, Alone woke up back at home. Tenma had felt uneasy and had gone up the mountain, finding Alone unconscious and bringing him back. As Alone dropped the bracelet Pandora gave him, he suddenly lunged to prevent Tenma from touching it. Suddenly, Tenma heard that water from the river was about to flood the town, and the city gates had been closed, abandoning them to the waters. Alone wanted to use words to persuade the gatekeepers, but Tenma wanted to take action instead of relying on others. Tenma reminded Alone of a promise they had made long ago to a childhood friend and vowed to protect his family and friends at all costs. He ran to the river and saw a boulder that had diverted the river's flow and attempted to break it, but instead, he broke his hand. Doko, walking through the forest, felt a faint energy and rushed to find Tenma. In his moment of despair, Tenma thought of Alone and the children, which ignited a surge of strength that allowed him to shatter the massive boulder, restoring the river to its normal course. Doko rushed down to lift Tenma up and acknowledged his remarkable strength, inviting him to become a warrior of Athena. Upon returning, Tenma sat for Alone to paint a portrait before departing with Doko. Alone wanted to capture the color of Tenma's eyes in the painting, but felt he lacked the skill at the moment, so he resolved that by the time Tenma returned, he would have perfected his craft and completed the painting. Later, Tenma met up with Doko. Seeing Alone, he was momentarily startled before they set off together. At the sanctuary of Athena, the domain of the 12 zodiac constellations is governed by 12 warriors representing each constellation. There is also a hall where Athena frequently descends to oversee matters. Just as Tenma finished his training, a group approached him. The leader, eager for a challenge, asked Tenma if he wanted to spar, and Tenma immediately accepted. The followers thought it unwise to provoke Tenma, but the leader, known as Yado, boasted that he had never feared anyone. Tenma had heard of Yado and viewed him as arrogant and aggressive. The two youths then clashed, exchanging blows continuously, but Yado quickly adapted, dodging and landing a punch on Tenma, frustrated by his defeat and Yado's mockery suggesting he should go back to the countryside. Tenma angrily punched a rock, But his hand hurt, while the rock remained intact. Duco returned, and seeing Tenma struggle after several months, remarked that he had achieved little. Puzzled by his previous success in breaking a rock, and now failing, Duco explained the principles of atomic physics to help Tenma understand the nature of strength, and then decided to stay and monitor his training. Suddenly, Tenma sensed a familiar presence and rushed to it. Recognizing the girl and the bracelet, it was Sasha, his and Alone's childhood friend. She did not recognize him until he introduced himself and showed her a bracelet. He was puzzled by her presence, knowing she had been adopted. Suddenly, a monster targeted Sasha, forcing Tenma to shield her. The creature then tied Tenma to a post and continued its assault on Sasha. Struggling, Tenma broke free and lunged, throwing a punch that cratered the earth. But the creature dodged and restrained him again, beating him until he collapsed. As the monster continued its assault in front of Sasha, she suddenly unleashed her power, demanding the release of Tenma. Realizing who she was, the creature saw an opportunity but was swiftly dealt with by Cheyenne, a warrior of the Aries constellation. According to him, Sasha was now the goddess Athena. 2 years later, Tenma was fighting an opponent larger than himself. Just when everyone thought he had been defeated, he rose and sent his opponent crashing into a stone pillar. A boulder then fell, and Tenma rushed forward, smashing it with a punch. Yedo observed that Tenma had indeed succeeded. Now, Tenma was officially recognized and granted the title of saint, along with his own armor. The high priest informed him that the situation was critical as shadows had begun to spread everywhere. As a newly titled saint, it was Tenma's duty to eradicate these shadows to protect the world and the goddess Athena. Tenma had completed his duty and hoped Alone had finished his painting. However, Alone now saw only gray in his paintings. Everything he painted seemed lifeless. Pandora reappeared and suggested that the way to save others was not through painting, but through death. She then led Alone to the chapel in the woods. This was where the repentance painting that Alone wished to see was located, and she would help him access it. Alone realized the chapel was open, and the priest from before was waiting for him. Meanwhile, Tenma secretly met with Sasha and reminisced about old times. They both knew that the shadows were closing in on their homeland and needed to act quickly to save their home and Alone. At that moment, Alone realized the priest was not human. He ran to see the painting, which turned out to be of the underworld King Hades, bearing a striking resemblance to Alone. The priest showed him inside, where Alone saw the children from the orphanage, who had died because he had painted them a few days earlier. The priest and Pandora began to brainwash Alone, convincing him that death was the fairest judgment and that the children would go to a better place. Alone began to believe that death was indeed salvation. At that moment, the moon disappeared, signaling that the underworld King Hades had awakened. Meanwhile, a group of saints was dispatched to handle a few of Hades' minions. They intentionally let one escape to follow it back to their lair. However, upon entering the lair, they realized they had walked into a trap. Not long after, only 3 of the group returned to report. They explained that the shadows were converging on a chapel in the woods and had revealed their true forms, turning their armors black. They were indeed dead and had been resurrected by the king of the underworld to return and claim Athena's head. Duco and Cheyenne immediately engaged in battle and decided to handle the situation once and for all. Sasha heard their true intentions too late. She stepped forward to stop them, but it was already too late. She approached the 3 and expressed her realization of their true desires. They indeed still wanted to return to fight for her, but it was too late. Duco and Cheyenne, feeling ashamed for having to fight their own comrades, decided to take care of the chapel in the woods. Duco then informed Tenma and Yedo of the plan. Duco cautioned Yedo not to overdo it, but Yedo insisted that he would not be outdone by Tenma. Meanwhile, Tenma, aware they were nearing their homeland, was determined to protect Alone on behalf of Sasha. Soon after, they arrived back home. Concerned for Alone and seeing the beam of light in the city, Tenma separated from the group. Duco hoped that Tenma wouldn't be too rash, but the scene before Tenma was one of death and the town engulfed in flames. When he reached home, he found only Alone's paintings, now stained with blood. An enemy appeared, intending to use Tenma as a sacrifice for Hades. But Tenma, enraged, blocked the attack and countered with a powerful blow that sent the adversary flying. At that moment, Alone realized Tenma had returned and decided to meet him as promised, to show him the painting he had created. In his despair, Tenma was then found by Duco. Suddenly, Yedo was blown into the area, Hades, or rather Alone, also revealed himself. Tenma couldn't believe his eyes seeing the gentlest person he knew transformed into such a brutal genocidal figure. He remembered the times when the three of them were together, and the farewell garland Sasha gave them before she left. Tenma needed an explanation from Alone, but Alone only saw Tenma as he used to be. Tenma had returned as a saint, while Alone had become a painter who had saved many people. Yet the painting of Alone from years ago remained unfinished. Alone finally found the red color he needed to complete his painting, the color of blood. He then boldly drew two diagonal lines across the canvas. Suddenly, Tenma was gravely injured, collapsing. Tenma tore off the bracelet from Alone's wrist. Duco noticed that Alone's hair had turned black. Alone bid farewell to his two friends and to his former self, as he was now officially becoming Hades. Without hesitation, Duco attacked, but one of Hades' subordinates, Kagaho, whose strength matched Duco's, intervened. Just as Duco was about to exhaust himself, Shine arrived and stopped him, reminding him that they had more critical matters to attend to. Duco then helplessly watched as Yedo and Tenma fell into a chasm created by the shattered ground. Hades instructed Kagaho not to pursue them, deeming his affairs resolved, and it was time to start the resistance. Upon returning, Hades gathered all of his shadow minions. He explained that each of Athena's warriors represented a constellation, so when a warrior fell, their constellation would darken and disappear, beginning with Tenma's. Hades intended his army to blacken the sky with Athena's death. Pandora then summoned the strongest of the shadow army, Minos, to the sanctuary to demonstrate their power. Kagaho, after meeting with Hades and seeing the wound Duco inflicted on Hades' hand, was enraged and vowed revenge. He left to find Duco, seeing that Minos had already departed for the sanctuary, so he followed. Meanwhile, Yedo, regaining consciousness amidst the rubble, discovered Tenma beside him. A mysterious girl passed by, surprised to find survivors. Sasha, dreaming, saw Alone completely corrupted, holding Tenma's severed head, shocking her awake. Cheyenne and Duco returned to report. Hearing about the town's destruction, Alone's possession by Hades, and Tenma's apparent death deeply shocked her. However, she managed to restrain her emotions. She urged them to rest soon to prepare for defending against Hades' upcoming assaults. Duco recognized Sasha's effort to appear strong, while Yedo struggled to pull Tenma from the debris. When the girl appeared, Yedo attacked but was swiftly subdued and slammed to the ground by her. She revealed that she was there to take Tenma and save him before it was too late, as he was not yet fully dead. She introduced herself as Uzurica, a warrior. She then led them underground to her tribe's dwelling. Although Yedo followed, he remained distrustful of her, given her strength matched a saint's and her knowledge of Tenma's condition. Upon entering, Yedo saw armors similar to those of their fellow saints, raising his suspicions about the organization's legitimacy, which led him to turn around, only to be attacked from behind. In his anger, he confronted them, but the elder explained that they were allies and also served Athena. The elder then removed Yedo's armor and instructed Uzurica to pour blood into it, explaining that a great amount of blood was needed to restore a saint's armor. Unable to take blood from warriors preparing for battle, he had used Uzurica's, whom he had trained. After tapping the armor, it returned to Yedo, who felt stronger than before. This convinced him that the elder's method could indeed save Tenma, and he decided to see for himself. The elder explained that Tenma's soul was still wandering in the underworld, and thanks to a garland containing Athena's prayers, he had not yet gone too far. However, once the garland's flowers fell, Tenma would be lost forever. Yedo asked what he could do to save Tenma and cheer up Athena, at which point the elder suddenly drew a sword, stating that if Yedo wanted to save Tenma, he must become a dead man to enter the underworld. He then handed Yedo the sword, telling him it would protect him for as long as Tenma had left. The elder then separated Yedo's soul from his body and sent him to the underworld. Suddenly, Uzurica was also sent down to assist Yedo. She urged that they act quickly before Tenma became one with the flow of souls. They then rushed off, only to find that the area seemed populated by people previously slain by Hades. At that moment, Tenma regained consciousness and found himself bound. A shadowy figure approached, informing him that he was at the boundary between the human world and the underworld. He claimed that Hades had been merciful for allowing Tenma to linger this long. Tenma tried to resist, but he was struck back. However, this caught Yedo's attention. The shadowy figure informed him that the strongest among them, Minos had been sent to the sanctuary, and soon Tenma would reunite with his friends below. As the figure departed, Yato and Yuzurika arrived, but a demon soon detected them. They quickly defeated the demon, but the previous shadowy figure had noticed them and returned. He ambushed Yuzurika from behind, but Yato quickly moved to protect her. Tenma warned Yato about the figure's ear-splitting scream ability. Despite the warning, Yuzurika charged forward and was blown away by the power of his scream. Yato was captured but managed to kick the figure's nose. Enraged, the figure used his scream to blast Yato away. By then, Tenma had freed himself. He charged and landed a powerful punch on the shadowy figure, shattering his armor. Yato was slightly irritated at getting beaten up while trying to save Tenma, who then explained why he was still half alive. Tenma expressed his desire to revive fully as soon as possible to protect the sanctuary, but Yuzurika mentioned they still had tasks to accomplish below, which could determine the outcome at the sanctuary. Meanwhile, Pandora reported that one of their shadows had been defeated, and prior to his defeat, he had claimed to have found Tenma's soul below. Hades was surprised, but Pandora suggested it might be a mistake since Hades himself had taken Tenma's life, so he couldn't still be alive. Yato and Tenma continued to argue. Yato claimed he had descended to save Tenma solely to cheer up Athena. Yuzurika urged them to stop bickering, and quickly reached the deepest part of the underworld to see what was happening. Hades knew Athena must have done something for Tenma to still be alive. However, Pandora reassured him not to worry, as Minos would surely sweep through the sanctuary since the constellations were darkening more each day. Minos was continuously using strings to bind the white warriors, treating them like puppets and twisting their bodies until they broke. They then advanced and discovered a rose garden. Two foolishly entered, trampled the roses, and bled to death. One of them remarked that these were demonic roses, and merely breathing them in could be fatal. The creator of this field was the gold Saint Albafica. He admitted that these were indeed demonic roses, and anyone who wished for death was welcome to step forward, otherwise they should retreat. A few, confident because Albafica stood unaffected, charged forward but were quickly defeated by him, throwing roses at them, causing them to fall into the rose bushes. The green armored one warned Minos to be cautious around Albafica, as he was as beautiful, but as deadly as these flowers. Cheyenne realized that Albafica was effectively defending the area, so they too needed to strengthen their defenses inside. They were uncertain if Albafica could handle everything outside alone. Cheyenne shared a rumor that Albafica's sanctuary housed a garden of demonic roses, and Albafica and his troops had to adapt to the poison. Albafica had mastered it to the extent that his blood had become as poisonous as the roses. Hence, despite his handsome appearance, he could not be close to anyone. Outside, Albafica challenged Minos to come down and fight, and the green-armored one descended to battle, immune to the rose poison. However, his strength was insufficient to harm Albafica, who possessed a type of rose that could corrode anything it touched. He managed to escape and began his final gambit. He emitted a toxic gas that withered all the roses. Worried that this would allow entry into the sanctuary, he decided to gather them all up. The villagers within the sanctuary were anxious about Albafica's disadvantage. A young girl still believed that Albafica would not lose as he was very strong. However, the villagers also worried about their own safety, living in the sanctuary and caught up in the holy war. Meanwhile, Albafica had absorbed all the purple poison and became immobile. The green-armored one seized the moment to attack, but retreated, sensing danger. Albafica recovered and transformed the toxic air back to red. He then created multiple poisonous thorns and struck the green-armored one, who finally succumbed. His outer armor protected him, but not his inside. At this point, Minos had to engage in battle. He created a tornado that swept away all the remaining poison and wilted flowers. He declared that from the start, he didn't need the green-armored one to fight because he alone was sufficient. Minos then captured Albafica with his strings, informing him that he would no longer be able to control his own body. Noticing nearby villagers, he sent someone to deal with them first, while he stayed to toy with Albafica a bit longer. Albafica struggled but was controlled and restrained by Minos, who then contemplated what to do next and decided to destroy Albafica's handsome face first. He made Albafica punch himself in the face and was about to proceed to break his arms and legs. Seeing Albafica's determined eyes, Minos knew exactly where to strike next. However, Albafica deliberately dislocated his shoulder to make the strike miss his eye. Minos thought Albafica couldn't do anything more and assumed the villagers were already dead. But Albafica corrected him, revealing that he had set more than one trap. The group that had gone ahead had triggered a hidden poison trap he had set earlier. Each rose released would pierce the heart of its target, and once fully red, that target would be doomed. Realizing Albafica's words were true, Minos decided to inflict even more damage on Albafica's body, but once again, poisonous gas appeared. Minos wanted to see whether the poison would kill him first, or if he would destroy Albafica first. Using all his willpower, Albafica pushed the poison towards Minos, who used his wings to block it and then forced Albafica to kill himself before turning away. The villagers were trying to evacuate. However, Minos found them and decided to destroy the remaining villagers. The young girl who believed in Albafica was trying to escape when her father was crushed by a rock. He urged her to run to the sanctuary while he died there. She then ran, believing Albafica was still safe. Previously, when it was raining on her way home, Albafica had given her his cloak and warned her not to come close. She had thought him cold until her father told her about Albafica's condition. She then ran off, hoping to see Albafica again. However, Minos found her. Seeing she had a rose, he knew she was connected to Albafica and intended to kill her as well. But Cheyenne arrived to battle Minos. As the leader of the 12 Gold Saints, Cheyenne felt it was his duty to stop the leader of the shadowy figures from wreaking havoc. However, he too was captured and controlled by Minos. As his arm was about to be twisted, a black rose severed the binding strings. Albafica approached once more, his body severely battered. He apologized to Cheyenne for causing trouble, but insisted this was a battle he must finish alone. He asked Cheyenne to lead everyone as far away as possible, because he was about to use his last resort. Minos believed that no matter what Albafica did, the outcome would be the same. To him, those without power were merely toys for others. He respected Albafica's beauty and offered to spare his life, but Albafica rejected his pity, stating he had lived in solitude for so long. But that was the life he chose, and no one had the right to judge it. Albafica then unleashed a barrage of poisonous bloodthorns at Minos. Cheyenne realized Albafica was using all the blood in his body to ensure Minos would die with him. Albafica collapsed and Minos thought Cheyenne would be next. However, Cheyenne told him to look down. The rose Albafica had earlier held in his mouth was now on Minos' chest. Initially a white rose, it had been dyed red by Albafica to deceive him. Now that the rose had turned genuinely red, Minos' life was effectively over. Minos then attempted to take the entire area down with him, but Cheyenne trapped him in a glass cage, leaving him to die in frustration. Albafica then uttered his last words. He expressed that he had lived his entire life with these roses, and this was the first time he found them truly beautiful. Cheyenne then carried Albafica's body back. The young girl followed and asked if the holy war continued indefinitely. Would all the Gold Saints eventually die? Cheyenne responded that they fought for ideals and justice, not to die. But if death was what they faced while upholding their ideals, they would fight to their last breath. Suddenly, an emissary from the underground faction arrived, requesting Cheyenne to meet with the high priest. By this time, Hades had learned of Minos' death alongside a Gold Saint. However, he could still resurrect his fallen minions. The high priest informed Cheyenne of this, but reassured him that since Minos was now within a barrier created by Athena, Hades' powers could not reach there to resurrect him. But they must defeat Hades before Athena runs out of strength. Meanwhile, word from the underworld has given them hope, promising that within a day, good news about Tenma's revival will reach Athena. Currently, Tenma is running, unaware of his destination. According to Uzurica, they need to find the great tree of the underworld, as the concept of death does not exist for ghost stones. The entity they had just defeated will eventually resurrect, and the way to counter them lies within that tree. The trio then found an exit, but were immediately confronted by the three-headed dog, Cerberus. Yedo decided to handle it alone, since he still had his armor. However, he could only focus on one head and was disrupted by the other two. Out of options, Yedo dragged the dog towards Tenma, allowing him to deliver a decisive blow that completely subdued it. Yet, before they could get far, Hades appeared. Tenma was shocked to see that Hades' hair had turned black. Uzurica seized this chance to eliminate the threat but was intercepted by Hades and thrown aside, as he was preoccupied with catching up with an old friend. Hades was amused by Tenma's resilience, proposing that Tenma join him and stand against Athena. However, Tenma refused, unwilling to turn the world into hell. He vowed to fight alongside Sasha to show Hades, or rather alone, which world was better. Hades was intrigued by Tenma's promise, knowing he was a man of his word, so he decided to let him go and looked forward to their next encounter. Hades then instructed Tenma to head to the sanctuary so the three could meet again. Yeto then made a foolish comment, earning him a punch from Tenma. The three continued on their way and reached the blood falls. As they climbed, Tenma felt something was off and turned to question the others. But suddenly, both seemed as if time had stopped around them. Then, unexpectedly, a gold saint named Asmita appeared. Noticing Tenma seemed to have encountered Hades once more, Tenma was puzzled as to why there would be a gold saint in the underworld. Meanwhile, Duco was passing through the domain of Gold Saint Aldebaran. He had just heard about the shadow creatures, and although Elbafida had passed and repelled the enemy, they could not yet let their guard down. The good news is that Tenma is still alive, but the bad news is that Aldebaran suspects something is off with Gold Saint Asmita. The enemy has reached the sanctuary, yet Asmita refuses to show himself outside his domain. Furthermore, Asmita's philosophy is quite foreign compared to the other gold saints. It is rumored that Asmita can traverse different dimensions and communicate with celestial beings. No one knows what Asmita is truly thinking, or what his real background is. Asmita now accuses Tenma of being a sinner of the heavens and suggests that Athena might lose this holy war. Doubting Asmita's intentions, Tenma attacks, but is blown down the falls by him. Confused about what Asmita meant, Asmita explains that Tenma and Hades have been connected through many past lives and their fate always flips with each holy war. In previous lives, Tenma, or the Pegasus Saint, was always close to and protected Athena, strong enough to defeat gods, and even the underworld king Hades. But in this life, he is too weak. Tenma insists that he doesn't care about Asmita's words and charges to fight. However, Asmita reminds him that his weak attacks will never harm him. Suddenly, Tenma's mind visualizes Asmita as a living Buddha. With a mere wave of his hand, Asmita causes Tenma to fall into the blood falls again. Asmita then questions Tenma about who he is and what he fights for. He seeks an answer Tenma must realize on his own, not the self-righteous words of someone who sees himself as a hero. Asmita then shows Tenma the 5 realms that a life must experience. The realms of hell, hungry ghosts, animals, tormented spirits, and finally, the human realm, where one endures endless suffering. Tenma has already experienced all the human realm's sufferings in his past. Asmita reveals that Tenma's past life had once wounded Hades, who now fears him and hides his true body in the deepest part of the underworld, instead possessing the purest human body available, which is why Tenma's friend, Alone, was corrupted. Hearing this, Tenma feels responsible for Alone becoming Hades. Yet now, he no longer cares. But Tenma found his own reason to fight, which was for his 2 friends, Sasha and Alone. No matter the era, that was his driving force. He charged at Asmita, only to be repelled again. Asmita understood Tenma's reason for fighting, but still found his strength lacking. Asmita then sat in meditation, deciding to stand and unleash his ultimate power, the cosmic secret. Tenma was trapped in a space where he could neither fight back nor move. Asmita began to strip him of his senses, and once all were taken, Tenma's soul would vanish. Soon, all 5 senses were obliterated, leaving him with no feeling or vision. Only his spirit, or 6th sense, remained. Suddenly, Tenma envisioned Asmita killing Sasha, considering her too weak to reclaim the earth from Hades. His senses abruptly returned, and he was able to move in this confined space and strike at Asmita. Determined not to let Asmita's vision come true, Tenma successfully hit Asmita. However, the reality was that he had struck the great tree of the underworld, caught in an illusion. But the experience felt real to his soul. Asmita acknowledged Tenma's strength and decided to allow him to take a fruit from the tree back to the elders. He also promised a day when they would duel on earth. Yeto and Uzurika were then able to move again. Tenma suddenly fell and showed them the fruit he had obtained. However, his garland was nearly exhausted, so he needed to be quickly taken back to the surface. Meanwhile, Asmita had gone to see Athena. It was known that Asmita had been born with severe sensory deficiency, yet with just a few senses, he still perceived the immense suffering of the world. Upon encountering Tenma, he saw what kind of person he was. Asmita then requested something from Athena. Later, he met Duco and acknowledged that Duco's younger brother was quite remarkable. Duco was puzzled as to how Asmita knew about Tenma, but now Asmita was eager to head into battle. Yeto's route was close to bringing Tenma to the surface, but just as they reached the surface of the underworld, they were blocked by a ghostly figure in beetle armored gear. Yeto decided to stay behind and fight, allowing Uzurika to take Tenma away before it was too late. Tenma then returned to the mortal world and met with the Elder. He asked about the others, and only Uzurika had regained consciousness. She informed Tenma that Yeto was still fighting below. Tenma disliked Yeto, but he didn't want him to die because of him. Yeto was struggling in the fight below as his opponent was sizable and robust. He was caught by the ghostly figure, and both exchanged blows to the face. Suddenly, the sword Yeto was carrying lit up and transported him back to the mortal world. However, upon his return, the Elder informed them that the shadow creatures had quickly followed them. Pandora had tasked them with retrieving the fruit from the great tree. They were also determined to completely annihilate Tenma's group. Yet, no matter how far they went, they couldn't penetrate further, as they had fallen into an illusion created by Asmita. He decided to send them back to the underworld. Tenma was puzzled why Asmita was there. Simply put, Asmita had come to meet him and also to see the Elder. As it turned out, the shadow creatures could not die, but this fruit could potentially end their immortality and seal them below. Asmita's reason for being there was to turn these fruits into weapons. At that moment, a formidable enemy from outside approached, also intent on retrieving the fruits. Even after falling into a thorny pit, they survived and climbed back up. They attacked, but were currently held back by a barrier. Tenma and Yeto felt secure, thinking they were safe with a gold saint present. However, Asmita informed them that they had to handle the situation themselves as he had other matters to attend to, specifically using his own blood to repair Tenma's armor, while incorporating the power of the great tree fruit into it. The enemies outside were still trying to break in when Tenma charged out to confront them. He felt much stronger with the new armor. Meanwhile, Asmita decided to dedicate everything he had to the cause. He then took his prayer beads to the top of the tower and sat in meditation to refine everything. Uzurika and Yeto went out to assist Tenma, informing him that they needed to buy enough time until Asmita completed his meditation. Exhausted from the prolonged battle, Tenma's group was wearing thin, while their ghostly adversaries remained as resilient as leeches. However, Asmita was beginning to make a significant breakthrough, causing the shadow creatures to panic and rush to stop him. Tenma followed them, determined to intercept. During this time, Asmita reminisced about when he first met Athena and how she had explained aspects of life to him. He had believed the world contained nothing but suffering, but she saw the suffering within him and acknowledged her own. She accepted her suffering as proof that she was still human. Asmita then completed his meditation and began to draw the shadow creatures into the reality of the cosmos, and with a flick, he eradicated them permanently, preventing their resurrection. He could now open his eyes and see the light of life, truly seeing Tenma's face for the first time. Asmita then passed away, having used all his strength to refine the ring. Although he was gone, his legacy would enable Athena's army to stand equal to Hades' forces. Meanwhile, the creatures previously killed by Albafika's poison had resurrected, sensing that Athena's barrier had weakened and was shrinking, allowing their revival. However, they didn't get far before being encountered by Gold Saint Aldebaran. They thought Aldebaran, lacking Albafika's poisonous garden, couldn't handle them, but he simply stood with arms crossed and let them charge. As they approached, he unleashed a shockwave that effortlessly defeated them. Duco arrived and saw that Aldebaran didn't seem to need much help. Aldebaran asked Duco to take the bodies back to the barrier to prevent their resurrection. Aldebaran had heard about Asmita's actions, but was unsure what exactly Asmita had done at the underground base. Suddenly, he sensed a powerful presence approaching, and it was none other than Kagaho. He came to settle scores with Duco, but Aldebaran was ready to teach him some manners. Meanwhile, the apprentices within the sanctuary continued their rigorous training to contribute to the efforts of the Gold Saints fighting outside. Kagaho, ignoring Aldebaran, stepped past him to find Duco. However, Aldebaran stopped him, and Kagaho responded by igniting flames to burn Aldebaran. Aldebaran dismissed the weak flames with a scoff, teaching Kagaho a lesson in humility with a powerful slam to the ground. Forced to transform into fire to escape, Kagaho maintained distance from Aldebaran. He then introduced himself to Aldebaran, who continued to stand arms crossed, irking Kagaho with his casual attitude during such a serious battle. Aldebaran was confident he could handle him without much effort. Acknowledging Aldebaran's intriguing nature, Kagaho launched a blazing strike. However, Aldebaran didn't even flinch, effortlessly withstanding the attack. He then retaliated, sending Kagaho flying a great distance. Aldebaran observed that although Kagaho's fire was strong, it indiscriminately consumed everything, including himself. He started to dismiss Kagaho's abilities as trivial, but Kagaho declared that his sole concern was serving Hades. Meanwhile, 3 apprentices reminisced about their time with Aldebaran. He had taken in orphan children under one roof and raised them. However, one day, he was called back to the sanctuary, leaving the children behind. The 3 who cherished him most chose to follow him to be trained as saints, though the training was exceedingly harsh. One child was fearful, having only wanted to be close to Aldebaran, as the reality of war was indeed terrifying. But just as a column was about to collapse, Aldebaran rushed to support it, enlightening them about the true nature of strength. Thanks to this, they were all filled with the determination to grow stronger and stand as equals beside Aldebaran. They suddenly noticed that Aldebaran's power had surged recently. He then faced Kagaho's attack head-on to gauge his strength. He countered the attack, which Kagaho narrowly dodged. Kagaho confidently claimed he had deciphered Aldebaran's technique. Aldebaran's crossed arms were a tactic to conceal the timing of his strikes. Given Aldebaran's incredible speed, Kagaho was eager to test who was faster. Duko, sensing Kagaho's presence nearby, quickly arrived at the scene and discovered several Silver Saints defeated along the way. They had been struck down by a supremely fast adversary unable to resist. Duko's suspicions were confirmed, prompting him to hasten his approach. And now, Aldebaran truly paid the price for his arrogance. He began to suffer burns from Kagaho's flames. As Kagaho charged fiercely, Aldebaran grabbed him and slammed him against the wall. However, Kagaho unleashed a technique that bound Aldebaran in flames, restricting his movements and preventing him from blocking the attacks. By the time Duko arrived, he found Aldebaran severely burned. Furious, believing Kagaho had killed Aldebaran, Duko launched an attack. Kagaho dodged and argued that he had come for Duko, but was impeded by Aldebaran, so he had no choice but to bind and burn Aldebaran to death. However, Aldebaran was not yet dead and requested Duko to step back from his fight. He believed that battles of Gold Saints should be one-on-one. He was determined not to be easily defeated by such flames. Just then, Aldebaran's 3 apprentices arrived. None of them wanted Aldebaran to die. This scene momentarily reminded Kagaho of his own brother. One apprentice picked up Aldebaran's helmet and returned it to him, expressing their desire to grow stronger under his guidance in future battles, insisting that he must survive. Aldebaran then rejoined the fight, and Kagaho decided to end it only if Aldebaran could no longer stand. He then launched a massive column of fire, adding 3 explosive bursts to trap Aldebaran. Aldebaran endured the heat and finally slammed the ground, shattering it and causing Kagaho to fall and be pinned down by debris. Kagaho managed to stand up again, albeit with a lost wing. He questioned Aldebaran's decision not to finish him when he had the chance, to which Aldebaran replied that he sensed Kagaho still had some goodness in him. Kagaho was not wholly aligned with the shadow creatures, but was instead searching for an ideal person to serve. He declared that becoming a shadow creature meant nothing to him. He chose whom he wanted to serve. After saying this, Kagaho turned his back to protect, allowing Aldebaran to finally rest. Despite the severe fighting, Aldebaran could still smile, having not had a chance to unleash his full power in a long time. Aldebaran then returned to report to the High Priest. The High Priest was surprised to see someone as strong as Aldebaran so battered. Aldebaran reported that the barrier was gradually shrinking, and that the shadow creatures were slowly being resurrected. They needed to act swiftly before Athena completely succumbed. At that moment, a gold saint named Sisyphus arrived. He revealed that Athena was nearing her limit, and they must soon free her from her duty of maintaining the barrier. Sisyphus then noted that currently 2 gold saints had perished, and 1 was severely injured. But Aldebaran insisted he was still fit to fight. So Sisyphus tested him with a light strike and realized Aldebaran was more injured than he appeared. Aldebaran knew Sisyphus valued Athena greatly, as he had been close to her since she was brought here. It was also Sisyphus who had taken Athena away from her 2 friends. Now, he wondered if bringing Athena here, and causing Alone to become Hades, was the right decision. Just then, a column of energy struck down. Athena's barrier shield was shattered, and Hades himself appeared. Sasha was shocked to see Alone again, but he declared that he was now Hades. Hades boldly destroyed Asmida's temple. Everyone was enraged by Hades' audacity to invade so brazenly, as if challenging them. Duco and Cheyenne still harbored hatred for the day Hades destroyed Tenma's homeland. Hades, not wanting any interference in his reunion with Athena, used a technique to immobilize Cheyenne and Duco. Aldebaran and Sisyphus were no exception. Hades approached Athena, stating he was no longer her brother but now Hades. He tried to awaken memories of Athena from past lives within Sasha. Sisyphus struggled to stand. Aldebaran admired Sisyphus for managing to rise despite his own inability to stand. However, Sisyphus was forcefully pushed down again by Hades. Sisyphus stood once more, drew his bow, and aimed at Hades, who recognized Sisyphus as the one who had taken Athena away 5 years earlier. Sisyphus still believed that his actions were meant to protect Athena. Yet sometimes he doubted if his decision was correct. He then fired an arrow at Hades, which was deflected back at him, leading to his demise. Athena was furious, exactly what Hades wanted. But just then, a teleportation spell occurred, and Tenma arrived to rally the forces once again. Tenma had taken out the prayer beads and sealed the souls of those about to be resurrected. Hades was taken aback, surprised that in such a short time apart, Tenma had acquired a weapon capable of countering his army. Tenma believed he fought not just to confront his own fate, but to keep his promise to stay by his two friends, questioning whether Hades could truly be ruthless towards Sasha as he had been in destroying their homeland. Hades remained silent while Tenma noticed a dog running towards Hades. It was the dog he had saved before, which suddenly transformed into Cerberus. Hades remarked that past events were different now, as they were in the midst of a holy war. Tenma had to pull Sasha away from Cerberus. Hades suggested that Tenma's ability to seal the ghosts was beneficial, since his mission was to bring redemptive death to all beings, from saints to ghosts. Tenma grabbed the prayer beads and charged, smashing Cerberus's mouth, then rushed towards Hades to fulfill the promise made in the underworld. However, Hades easily immobilized Tenma, noting that he no longer shone as brightly as before. Just as Hades was about to strike Tenma with his sword, a magical formation appeared. Hades suddenly found his powers drained, surrounded by talismans. The high priest appeared, remarking that Hades must still remember him. He recognized the high priest as one of the survivors from the previous holy war. The high priest had weakened Hades' powers, allowing everyone to move again. He had prepared this trap in advance, not expecting to catch Hades. But Hades, dismissing the talismans as relics from a 200-year-old battle, blasted the high priest away, angered further by his interference with his reunion with Tenma. Despite his reluctance to admit it, the high priest was no match for Hades. He then signaled to Sasha to use her magic to teleport the temple to a tower. This was the site where Hades' army had been sealed 200 years ago, and he planned to fervently seal Hades here once and for all, returning a kind-hearted Alone to Sasha and Tenma. But Hades merely thought they were naive. At that moment, a voice echoed, and a strike was directed towards Tenma and Sasha. Both managed to dodge just in time as a chariot descended. It was Pandora's. The high priest recognized her as Hades' right hand and the one who unleashed evil into the world. Pandora admitted her eternal loyalty to Hades, claiming she should have been reincarnated as Hades' sister, not Athena. Yet Athena dared to take a mortal body and become Hades' sister to oversee him. Athena, however, was unconcerned by these words, cherishing the days spent with Alone and Tenma. When Pandora was about to slap Athena, Tenma intervened and blocked her. Growing bored, Hades then ordered Pandora to return. When Tenma tried to stop her, Hades demonstrated the vast gap in their powers. Hades then created a painting in the sky depicting the gold saints and all humanity. He explained that once the painting was complete, everyone would die. Everyone at the sanctuary saw this and knew it was Hades' doing. Hades informed Tenma that the painting would be finished when it covered the sky and would claim the souls of all on earth. Tenma knew what happened to those Hades painted, having experienced it himself and knowing how terrible it was. Hades then returned to his chariot, weary of the proceedings. As Tenma attempted to follow, a ghost attacked him. Aldebaran stepped in to stop the ghost, believing in Tenma's ability to defeat Hades. Tenma clung to the chariot, seeking answers from Hades. But as he was about to strike, Pandora shot him down. The ghost left with her. Hades questioned Pandora if she had secretly sent the ghost to monitor him, but she hesitated to answer. Meanwhile, the higher echelons of ghosts observed that Hades was still too impulsive, unable to sever his memories of living with Athena and Tenma. They felt compelled to awaken Hades to abandon Alone's memories entirely. Meanwhile, the High Priest and Athena realized that their chances to bring Alone back were nearly gone, and the only option left was to confront Hades head-on. 3 days had passed, and everyone had begun the reconstruction of the sanctuary, but they were all haunted by the fear of Hades' painting. Doko had to knock some sense into Tenma to get him working. He was glad that Tenma was alive and had returned to face Hades. Tenma was saddened about Sisyphus, who had been struck by Hades and was still unconscious. The High Priest explained that Hades could inflict damage directly to the human soul, hence Sisyphus might never wake up again. Tenma no longer harbored any affection for Alone, realizing that if Alone were still conscious, he wouldn't commit such atrocities. Doko also advised him to defeat Hades as soon as possible, as Hades now posed a terrible threat to the world. Yet part of them still hoped Tenma could bring Alone back, as both Sisyphus and Asmita believed Tenma and Hades share a unique connection. Later, Aldebaran's apprentice came asking Tenma for help with heavy lifting. Seeing the apprentice carry more than he could, Tenma wished to grow stronger and help him. Meanwhile, Pandora unexpectedly encountered 2 other underworld deities. They criticized her for being too slow in controlling Hades, and suggested that if she couldn't handle it, they would help Hades focus entirely on completing the painting. Pandora's job was to eliminate the distractions for Hades. She decided it was time to take decisive action. She went to the Chamber of the Constellations and summoned 2 assassins targeting Tenma, thinking they could strike swiftly before Tenma could react. Pandora was determined to remove any distractions for Hades, hoping to finally ease her own mind. At that time, Aldebaran visited Asmita's shrine to offer a toast of wine. He apologized for once doubting Asmita, but swore to join the other gold saints in using the prayer beads Asmita had sacrificed his life to create to seal away the demons. Upon leaving, Aldebaran noticed many bats around. He then saw Tenma and his students training together and decided to join them to help Tenma train. He stood for Tenma to hit him. Even though Tenma used all his strength, he couldn't move Aldebaran, who effortlessly flicked him back. Everyone was training until dusk when suddenly Aldebaran's students fell asleep uncontrollably. Tenma, who was training, heard the sound of bats and also fell asleep. Aldebaran was no exception. Taking advantage of the situation, 2 assassins sneaked in intending to kill Tenma. However, before they could act, Aldebaran stopped them. He had disabled his own hearing to ignore the bat's sounds, and launched an attack that shattered one assassin's mask. The bat controller then stabbed Aldebaran in the ribs. The 2 assassins decided to team up to take down Aldebaran. They initially only wanted to kill Tenma, but eliminating a gold saint would be a bonus. They attacked relentlessly, reopening Aldebaran's old wounds. Despite being beaten brutally, he managed to grab one by the neck and smash him to the ground. The other decided to summon the messenger of death. Even if Aldebaran could not hear the song, it would still stop his heart. Aldebaran collapsed and the assassin thought he had finished the job and turned towards Tenma. But Aldebaran was still slightly conscious. Hoping his students and Tenma would continue to live and grow, he grabbed the masked assassin and unleashed his final ultimate move. A weaker assassin survived and planned to finish off Tenma to claim the credit. However, Kagaho arrived and stopped him. Kagaho believed Hades would not want anyone else taking Tenma's life, so he intended to keep Tenma alive to find out who ordered the assassination. After learning it was Pandora and the purpose behind the assassination, the weak assassin tried to persuade Kagaho to kill Tenma together and share the credit, but Kagaho killed him instead. Tenma then awoke to find Aldebaran dead. Kagaho informed him that Aldebaran's death was due to his weakness. Pandora had ordered his assassination, leading to Aldebaran's death while protecting him. If Tenma wanted to learn more, he would need to grow stronger and find out himself. Kagaho then walked away, believing he had settled his debt with Aldebaran. Meanwhile, Aldebaran's students also awoke and were inconsolable. Tenma felt guilty, knowing it was his fault. The next day, he heard people talking about how Aldebaran had died protecting him. Tenma decided to leave the place, partly out of a sense of guilt and partly not wanting anyone else to die for him. Tenma had left. Duko and Cheyenne, subsequently set out to find Tenma, suspecting he was distressed after witnessing so many gold saints fall. Worse, Tenma could be accused of desertion if he left at this critical moment. Meanwhile, two of Aldebaran's students visited his grave. One girl considered giving up her aspirations to become a saint due to feeling untalented. However, she resolved to support the war effort in a different capacity, hoping her friend could soon grow stronger and possibly inherit Aldebaran's gold cloth. As Tenma passed by and saw the two, his feelings of inadequacy only deepened. Suddenly, another gold saint approached him, informing him that Duco and Cheyenne were desperately searching for him. Tenma felt like a target for Pandora's assassins. Staying would only endanger more lives like Aldebaran's. But the saint laughed off the idea, asserting that Aldebaran's death was a result of his weakness. This is war, and death is inevitable. Moreover, catching a saint like him wouldn't stop the holy war. He bluntly told Tenma that his fleeing stemmed from his own weakness, and if Tenma intended to desert, he would execute him. However, he had no plans to kill Tenma since he was still useful. Instead, he would imprison Tenma and release him when necessary. Tenma struggled and tried to break out of the jail, but it was futile since his armor had been taken, and he didn't even understand what he was trying to accomplish anymore. He knew how ashamed Asmita and Aldebaran would be if they saw him now, after they had sacrificed themselves and put their trust in him. Yet he had achieved nothing significant. Meanwhile, Pandora realized her assassination plan had failed. If Hades found out she acted on her own, he would surely be furious. Yet she believed Hades would understand her motives. Suddenly, the former jailer appeared. He would forgive Pandora's failure this time, but she must explain herself to Hades directly. Despite her efforts, Pandora realized that Hades would never truly care for her emotions, and their paths began to diverge as Hades neglected his painting to search for Tenma. However, they would lend her power to keep Hades there. Upon confronting Hades, Pandora was rebuked for acting independently, but she noticed that Hades still held on to memories of his childhood friends. She decided that these memories were corrupting him. Using the branch given to her, she trapped Hades in an enclosed space to force him to focus on his painting. Meanwhile, Tenma tried to break out of his cell using brute strength. Suddenly, Yedo found him and showed him a secret escape route. Yedo wondered why misfortune seemed to follow whenever he was involved with Tenma. Once outside, Tenma reunited with Uzurika, who had become a saint and would join Yedo and Tenma to the end. Tenma knew the high priest had influenced these events and expressed his desire to go to Hades' palace. At that time, the high priest believed Tenma should be confined to keep the sanctuary safe. Athena reluctantly agreed, but the elder arrived, arguing that they should let Tenma act as he wished, as clipping his wings would prevent him from ever reaching alone. The elder took full responsibility for Tenma, and the high priest reluctantly agreed to let him care for Tenma. He also advised Athena, or rather Sasha, to meet Tenma one last time to say goodbye. She left her staff behind and ran off alone. Meanwhile, the high priest and the elder knew there were two manipulators behind Pandora. Realizing Tenma was on his way to find Hades, they decided to set traps outside the palace to prevent him from entering. As Yedo lamented not seeing Athena before leaving, she suddenly appeared. When Tenma reunited with Sasha, he promised that the three friends would meet again. He was determined to face everything in this holy war. That was his promise, and he would strive to fulfill it. This marks the end of part 1 of the film.